In recent months, much of the media commentary around Europe's tech industry has focused on the need to de-risk from America. Several EU member states are now developing their own national messaging apps and payment service providers, and trying to reduce their dependence on US tech platforms. However, less attention has been paid to the quiet but significant growth in Europe's tech sector in recent years. Over the past decade, the number of funded tech companies in Europe has risen from 13,000 to almost 40,000, representing some 15% of Europe's GDP. Moreover, The Economist reported in March that, since late 2024, labour migration in tech from the US to Europe has actually outstripped that from Europe to America, with the UK, Switzerland, the Netherlands and Denmark benefiting the most. So, in this video, we'll explore Europe's growing tech economy and how it's quietly booming.
European politicians don't really talk about the energy transition anymore, but that doesn't mean it isn't happening. In fact, Europe has quietly redoubled its effort at decarbonisation. In the latest issue of our magazine, we look at this rare good news and why the energy transition has ended up looking different to the one we envisioned. That's just one of 80 pages in the magazine, because there's more in Too Long than you'd expect. Purchase your copy by clicking the link in the description. First up, a bit of background on Europe's tech sector, which has long lagged behind America's. Since the emergence of the internet in the 1990s, the US has held a dominant position in the global digital economy, producing tech giants including Apple, Google, Microsoft and Nvidia. In fact, US chipmaker Nvidia, now the world's biggest company and the first to be valued at over $5 trillion, is bigger than Europe's 20 largest companies combined. Today, Europe is home to just 12 of the world's 100 most valuable tech companies, compared to 56 in America and 16 in China. In fact, less than a fifth of the world's most valuable tech companies are located in the EU. This is largely because of difficulties in scaling across the EU's diverse national markets, less venture capital and more cautious investments in Europe compared to the US, and less R&D, research and development funding for startups. Specifically, at the moment, the EU represents just 7% of global R&D spending in software and internet technologies, compared to 71% by US firms and 15% by Chinese firms. This is largely why, as recommended by the highly influential 2024 Draghi report on the future of European competitiveness, European policymakers have begun taking steps to mobilise capital and harmonise the EU's internal market. For example, the so-called E6 of Germany, France, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands and Poland are now pushing to advance plans for a capital markets union, which would create a single market for capital, a plan that should help fast-growing European startups scale quicker. However, even if Europe's tech economy remains a long way behind America's, it has seen significant growth over the past decade. Last week, Dan O'Brien, chief economist at the Institute of International Economics, described the 60% growth in European tech employment over the past decade as one of the most important stats which anyone remotely interested in economics should be aware of. Moreover, a number of promising digital startups, such as Vinted, the Lithuanian second-hand clothes marketplace, Octopus Energy, the British cloud-based energy platform, and the German drone manufacturer Helsing, have all emerged in the past decade. Essentially, tech is the defining feature of modern service-based economies, and Europe's growing tech sector is carving out new and highly competitive niches. As such, there are rising calls for the EU to do more to encourage AI adoption, improve digital infrastructure, or increase R&D spending to its target of 3% of GDP, in order to help new digital companies grow and scale. Essentially, as we see it, there are three things behind Europe's quiet tech boom. First, a rise in capital funding inside Europe. Second, increasing digitisation. And third, the recent impact of US President Donald Trump. The first thing behind Europe's growth in tech is an increase in venture capital or VC funding. Historically, capital funding in the US has been far deeper and less risk-averse than in Europe, with many of the big US tech companies, including Uber previously and OpenAI currently, operating at multi-billion-dollar losses before becoming profitable. However, in the decade between 2015 and 2025, VC investment in European startups nearly quadrupled, from $22 billion to $85 billion. Still a long way off the US, but around $30 billion more than China.
Alongside this, investment from European pension funds has increased, and according to Sifted, European VC has outperformed US funds over the past 10 and 15 years, with 42% of entrepreneurs, according to the trade association Invest Europe, saying it's more attractive to be a founder in Europe today than a year ago. Alongside that, in December, the European Commission published its new plan to unify Europe's segmented capital markets, which should help startups raise money. While this won't be easy, as it will involve efforts to harmonise tax regimes between different EU member states, it's probably necessary if the EU wants to remain competitive. Several governments, including in the UK, France and Germany, are also trying to encourage pension funds to invest more in risky assets, such as newly founded tech firms, and the UK government has also recently launched its Savvy Squirrel ads, aimed at encouraging cautious British savers to start investing, potentially increasing the overall supply of investment capital in the economy. The second reason for Europe's quiet tech boom is increased digitisation. Countries like Estonia, which produced Bolt, Europe's answer to Uber, and Sweden, which produced Spotify and Klarna, have combined high-quality digital infrastructure, strong technical education, and early adoption of digital tools like AI to help lower the cost of starting new tech firms. Meanwhile, the German government has created a new digital ministry to accelerate digital infrastructure, and the UK is also trying to digitise in healthcare, the justice system, and public sector. The third and final reason for Europe's quiet tech boom is, you guessed it, Trump. For decades, the US, especially Silicon Valley, has been a receptacle for global tech talent, attracting researchers, engineers, and founders from around the world. But since 2023, according to analysis by Revelio Labs, transatlantic tech migration has slowed, and the balance of movement has actually shifted towards Europe. This is partly thanks to growing tech hubs in European cities like London, Paris and Stockholm, but also due to the impact of Trump's visa restrictions and immigration crackdown. Of course, it's not certain that this tilt towards Europe will last beyond Trump, but he does seem to have gifted Europe a once-in-a-generation opportunity to achieve true digital sovereignty, and Europe is clearly seizing the moment. The latest issue of our magazine is out now, and if you want our best value ever, subscribing and using code SUMMER26 gets you your first copy for as cheap as £4.99, as well as 20% off as long as you stay subscribed. I told you about one of the articles at the start of this video, but this issue's truly jam-packed with content from all around the world. Obviously, the headline section is our rundown of Trump's wars around the world, discussing all of the different countries and regions which have faced Trump's military wrath, going nation by nation through the timeline, and reaching the ultimate question, has Trump created the modern holy war? From there, we dive into our regional sections, starting with the UK, where we unpack the results of the recent elections, take a look at the UK's odd foreign posture, and discuss if Britain has become ungovernable. Then, in the EU section, we discuss how Russia's sphere of influence is fading, why Europe's energy transition isn't what you expect, as well as looking at the Euro's missing members. Finally, in the global section, we discuss if we're seeing echoes of the First World War, what's next for Iran, as well as what really came from the Gen Z protests we saw emerging last year. That's not even everything. With this 80-page issue, our joint longest ever, there's even more to read than I've even been able to mention here. So click the link in the description to learn more and grab your copy today.